health as you join us. Grab a seat. We're about to take a ride again and a dive into a discussion around Global Compact for Migration Objective number 14. We have, in the last 13 weeks, believe it or not, dived through different elements of the Global Compact on Migration and invited various experts to join us in deliberating, engaging, and sometimes even dismantling, and often also questioning, why did we come up with these objectives? Are the targets attainable? And what kind of actions can we foresee in terms of moving it forward? And particularly in the time when we have global reviews that have already started to take place, I think at the national level, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of engagement in different quarters, whether it's between government, among civil society organizations, and also in the academic world, in understanding what this Global Compact can translate to us, particularly in these very uncertain times. So we look at it as part of our leverage for hope to bring us back to the drawing table on what kind of priorities that we had set out 2 years ago. Without much further ado, I would just like to introduce our able panelists, but maybe just be able to say that this webinar is looking particularly at ensuring consular protection, assistance, and cooperation throughout the migration cycle. And the Global Compact text itself reads that we commit to strengthen consular protection and assistance of our nationals abroad, as well as consular protection between states, in order to better safeguard the rights and interests of all migrants at all times, and to build upon the functions of consular missions to enhance interactions between migrants, state authorities of countries of origin, transition, destination, in accordance with international law. And it has a list of actions that it proposes. I will not go into breaking them down because this is what the ABLE panel that we have invited today is going to do. And I thought that it's a very good start for us to read it, because I think it's a reminder of who should be around the table on this. And it essentially talks about all of government, whole of society. So that's the kind of approach that we have also been trying to encourage in these discussions that we have been deliberating in the last couple of weeks as part of this GCM webinar series. And on the panel today, we are very happy to be joined in video by Honorable Paul Raymond Cortes, who is the Consul General of the Philippines, Dubai to the Philippines, of the Philippines to Dubai, Northern Emirates, and the United Arab Emirates. And we will have an intervention of him by video. Unfortunately, he had to attend to urgent matters, but was very kind enough to share with us a video. And hopefully later he's able to join us for the Q&A session. And we are also very pleased to welcome His Excellency, Dr. Nazur Islam, who is the Ambassador of the People's Republic of Bangladesh to the Kingdom of Bahrain. And then we have Associate Professor Maria Elisa Lao, who is joining us from the Department of Political Science at Ateneo de Manila University. We are also very delighted that His Excellency Simon Pierre Adovelande, who is the Ambassador of Benin to the People's Republic of China, and he also represents several other countries. And we are also very happy to welcome Mr. Kudus Oluwatoyin Adebayo, who is a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies in the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, in the department where he particularly works looking at diaspora and transnational studies. So I think it's quite an exciting panel. And my name is Paddy Sianga Knudsen, and I'm very happy to moderate this session. And on behalf of the 3 organizing committees, and we will be flashing their different details, as well as their Twitter handles, as well as the social media handles later on, we would like to warmly welcome you on behalf of the Global Forum, the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, working together with CSUN as well as with MFA on this platform to bring you these delightful sessions to engage with us. As part of our webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping before we go into the panel, we do have a tab for questions. And we would invite you to put your questions into the chat box. We ask that the chat box is really reserved for questions, and interactions can happen a little bit later during the sessions, just to keep our panel and our discussants as well as the audience engaged into the different discussions we're having today. We also we may have an opportunity to ask participants in the audience to unmute yourself and ask the questions that you will ask. So we will ask that your questions are asked very prompt to allow the many interventions that I'm sure will come from the floor, as we have had in the last couple of weeks. We are also very delighted to be joined by a side panel, because in these forums we always have a side panel, and we'll be calling them up to engage with us. So the style of our conversation is very much interactive. But and as we start off on that, I will just ask my colleagues in the processing room, which is a very big room with a lot of people behind the team, to just play with us the video from Honorable Paul Raymond Cortes, who is the Consul General of the Philippines to Dubai and Northern Emirates, as well as to the United Arab Emirates. Please stay with us, and you are welcome to unmute yourselves so that we can focus on the video for a couple of minutes. Thank you. Feroz, over to you.
Well, first and foremost, allow me to express my appreciation to William Goyes for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful webinar, where Migrant Forum in Asia, together with the Cross-Regional Center for Refugees and Migrants, the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, and the Civil Society Action Committee, who are jointly organizing this 23-part series of a weekly review discussion on the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration Objectives. I have been asked specifically to speak on the issues and challenges of our migrant workers on account of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the responses and the roles of the foreign missions here in the destination country to help out our migrants. Obviously, the first issue that was faced by our migrants were their losses in employment, either permanent or temporary. Many of our migrants have been asked to go on a furlough or a no work, no pay scheme, or a reduced salary because of the closure or the temporary closure of their offices or employment areas. Obviously, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, many of the businesses, restaurants, the hotels, or many of our migrants' work had to close down due to the lack of clients, due to the lack of people patronizing these businesses, and the companies have a difficult time trying to keep up with the salaries or their emoluments due them, and as such, they were either asked to reduce their salaries or asked to go on a lesser number of work hours. And for those of our migrants who had lost their jobs, it was already a difficult time for them, because now they had to think about going back home in the Philippines because they had no way of sustaining themselves here in Dubai or in the UAE, and they asked for repatriation. And the first issue there would be whether there were enough flights at all from the UAE to the Philippines, bearing in mind that both countries and the global community, for that matter, all the airports in the world had shut down to international air flights. And this was an issue for many of our migrants, because some of them had to wait for flights until it had resumed. And while waiting for these flights, of course, the issue then would be, where would they get their food? Where would they get their money to pay for their accommodations? Remember, again, keep in mind that many of them had lost their jobs or had been forced to take on a lower salary due to the closure of their work areas, and thus the accommodation payments, the food provisions for food and all that, and even the financial obligations, their credit card dues and so forth and so on, both here in the UAE and in the Philippines, was an issue for many of our migrants. And along with that, there were also some of our migrants who had begun to, since they had lost their jobs, or the companies had let them go, and their visas, of which they were part of, had now been cut off. And here come the issues on the overstay fines and immigration problems, and even unpaid claims of end of service benefits for our migrants. These are the concerns, the legal concerns that were an issue to them on account of the pandemic. And of course, notwithstanding, there were health issues as well. Many of our migrants were infected or had become positive with the COVID-19 virus. And of course, something that is very difficult to measure the mental health issues of many of our migrants. Many had been locked down inside their homes, many of them staying with 10 to 15 other roommates or flatmates. And of course, that poses an issue as far as health is concerned, as far as mental issues are concerned. And if and when they get hospitalized, either because of COVID-19 or any other medical, on any medical account, then the what do you call it, the issues pertinent to the hospital expenses have become very prevalent. Now, what was the role of the Philippine Consulate General and the Philippine Embassy and many of our labor office in trying to alleviate these these issues faced by our migrants? Of course, first and foremost, they had nobody to run to, and the first people that they would be running to is the Philippine government, which would be us here in Dubai and the Northern Emirates, and we would be trying to reach out to them, to our overseas Filipinos, to our clientele, to the community and other stakeholders in trying to find ways and solutions to help our fellow Filipinos in need. And in addition to that, also, we had to coordinate very, very closely, let's say, with the UAE government health authorities, the police, and trying to find out what measures could be done to help them. And of course, to remind them of the health protocols as well. We had come up with, the 24 hotline service. You have to try to make sure that all avenues for communication would work. So either WhatsApp, Facebook messaging, by phone, by SMS, by text, and whatever social media would be available for them, just for us to find out exactly what they needed and how we could be of assistance to them. Along with that, there were issues with regard to trying to facilitate and coordinate their legal and financial concerns, let's say, with the companies or their employers. Obviously, when many companies closed, it was difficult for them to settle money claims or end of service benefits. We tried to talk to the employers. We tried to exchange views on how this could work for both the employer and the employee. Obviously, when many companies had shut down, many did not have enough funding, or they had less monies to settle the end of service benefits for the employees that they had laid off. And there were also questions about immigrations. How are we going to formalize or systematize extending their stays here? In early April, the UAE had come up with a provision that would allow those with overstaying visas to stay on a little longer until the end of December 2020, but that was since moved earlier again to, if I remember right, July, and then August, and then November, and then now December. So this was an issue for a lot of people. Where do they get the money to pay for their come up with new or extended visas or stays in the UAE, and how do we facilitate the procedures for bringing them back home in the Philippines? At a certain point, there were only very, very few flights between Dubai and the UAE. Between Dubai and the Philippines, and there were also issues with regard to the number of people that the Philippines can accept, because we were looking at the whole diaspora wanting to go back home, not just the people from the GCC, not just the Filipino community from the GCC, but even from those in the various parts of the world, seafarers in particular in Europe, in the US, and in Asia, and so forth and so on. So this also put a strain in trying to determine how best to make sure that we are allowing our people to go back home. At the same time, keeping in mind health protocols that have been in place in back home in the country. And of course, apart from this, we also needed to come up with the provision of free legal advice for many of our migrants who would come to us and seek clarification on how best they could resolve their own situation. And one thing that was very difficult to provide, it was the provision of psychosocial services, something that we were not very equipped to do. In fact, in the Philippine Consulate Office, we have one lady from the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or the DSWD in the Philippines, who would act as the social welfare attaché. And she would, in addition to psychosocial services, would also provide basic needs for the displaced, distressed, vulnerable, and even medically affected overseas Filipinos. We would partner with local government, local grocery and retail suppliers for basic for food, for rice, for sugar, for eggs, for canned goods. And obviously, this was not enough to, for over 500, 600,000 Filipinos in Dubai alone. And it was an issue as far as budget is concerned. But of course, we also have the community to work side by side with the consulate, with the labor office, with our social welfare attaché, in trying to reach out to as many distressed overseas Filipinos as possible. Manila had also come up with a basic financial assistance, or ACAP, which they gave out to those who had been terminated from work or those on a no work, no pay scheme. This was from a budget of the Department of Labor and Employment, but this was not specifically only for the distressed Filipinos in the UAE, but globally. And because it was global, you have finite resources. There was only a number of beneficiaries set per country. And in the case of Dubai, it first began with 6,000, and then 12,000, and then 22,000. And we're still waiting for quite a number of additional packages. Remember also in Dubai, about 97,000, 98,000 had applied for this one-time financial assistance of $200. Of course, we also had to do some hospital visitation for many of our Filipinos who had been hospitalized for various reasons, not for COVID reasons, but for those, let's say, for heart attack or any other of their medical concerns. At the end of it all, there was much that was expected of the missions. It's a catch-all service provider, a shock absorber for everything that the Filipinos needed here in the UAE, while awaiting for things to ameliorate. And this was a very difficult time, and it still is, for many of our personnel, because many had also been affected and were shocked. And it was something that the whole world was not prepared to do. And as such, it was quite interesting to find out how best both the host government and the Philippine missions, or the missions of the nationals in the host country, could work together. And let me just give you a slight example of what we had done. When in the middle of the pandemic, when people were begging for food assistance, we had coordinated very closely with Dubai Police in trying to distribute cooked food to our nationals. Remember also, it was the UAE is very strict about distribution of food, especially one that did not pass through health protocols and sanitation procedures. And so we needed to be very clear that the distribution of food needed to be in partnership with the local authorities to make sure that there are no legal issues involved in trying to distribute. So the Dubai Police would ask us for a list of the Filipinos, and we would give them the list to the police so that they would distribute the cooked food, the biryani, to many of our nationals at their places of domicile. And it was a beautiful partnership that lasted throughout throughout Ramadan and even after Ramadan. And it's one of the great partnerships and collaborations between the missions we have here in the host country and the government, the host government for that matter. It's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing pandemic. And so the partnership could not just end as that. And we have to be very clear also with our people that everyone has to extend a little sort of patience and it's something very difficult for a lot of our people to understand because, when you're at the edge of your rope and it's just difficult to grope for more space to keep your lifeline intact. But we're very grateful to the Filipino community because not only have the select members of the Filipino community leadership rise up to the challenge of being more proactive. They've also partnered very, very closely with the Philippine consulate in trying to ensure that we have more people to reach, we have more people to make understand what exactly our role is in trying to do this pandemic. And we'd like to open the floor for those who'd like to find out more about how the missions were able to cope. It's an ongoing process, as I said. But again, thank you very much to Migrant Forum in Asia for allowing us this opportunity to be a part of this beautiful 23-part webinar. Thank you very much and mabuhay!
Well, Inatsesha, thank you very much for that video. I am hoping that Ambassador Islam will be able to join us a little bit later on for us to have a Q&A. I think he brought out some very interesting points there. It feels as though just looking through what the Global Compact recommends as actions, the Philippines seems to be taking a step well ahead into addressing some of those concerns and particularly, looking at this whole element of having transparent systems around how they will support migrants so that also helps in terms of the accountability side. So I see these things sort of matching together, but also that brings in the role of what the migrants themselves have to put in, because it's also very important to show here that migrants have a responsibility in ensuring that the wheel is oiled in the right way. I think that I will have an opportunity to introduce Ambassador Islam when he joins us for the Q&A, so I will not go ahead and read his bio for now. But let's just move on to the next speaker, and I think she arrives very timely into the discussion. And our next speaker will be Maria Elisa Lao, who is an associate professor at the Department of Political Science, Ateneo de Manila University, and she's also the convener of the Working Group on Migration at the same department in her university. She's a research associate at the Institute of Philippine Culture, and she's also the chair of the Gender Focal Point Committee in the same university. She got her doctorate in public administration from the National College of Public Administration and Governance in the University of the Philippines, and her current research work looks at Philippines foreign policy, gender, labor migration, and social change. Maria, I think it sounds very packed in terms of the your different research areas, but I think that we can just zoom you in. Can we ask you to pick, because I'm sure you can pick any one of these lenses that you work on, could we ask you to pick the gender lens for us as you just explore a little bit deeper into this objective in trying to understand how we can have a much more all of government, all of society working together to ensure that citizens who are abroad, when they have left their homes and are in another country, they can receive adequate services from their embassies. And at the same time, I think it's also very important to put it in the context of any kind of crisis. And of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic that is hitting and actually seems to have a domino effect of causing even more crisis. So you're welcome to also pick up any one of those as you just take us through your intervention for the next few minutes. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Patty. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone here. Um, this is something which I'd like to share off the bat that I think I can see some Filipino names also on the webinar probably know that my country is unique because 10% of our population is abroad. So it's a big issue for us, migration, labor migration, and each part of the migration cycle has a very profound effect on our country. And when we talk in migration circles, we talk about uh, return and reintegration, when our migrant workers will finally come home. Usually it's in the context of coming and then going or leaving again, or in the context of a change in the economic situation. But we always also, at the end of each conversation, talk about the big one. When will this big one come where many of our migrant workers who are not prepared to come home will have to come home? And it seems like the big one is now. And I was asked earlier to talk about the issue from a gendered lens, and I point you a little bit to the experience of our migrant workers in households. So our female domestic workers abroad who have just been profoundly um, affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've heard from many of the representatives from the different countries, and they have said that, well, basically everyone, the whole world is working from home, which means that instead of their usually, following the rhythm of taking care of children, for example, and then preparing meals, it has become more or less a 24-hour cycle of work for them. So work has become more difficult. And they have had to deal, for example, with other issues, such as more difficulties back home. They've had to deal also with the uncertainty of work and then as mentioned by our representative from our embassy, uh, how long will their contracts last? So there's a lot more to to deal with. And they said the one good thing though that has come out of this pandemic is that they've actually been in better contact, close contact, better contact with their families as they check up on each other more often and they ask each other how they are during this uncertain time. The other complicating matter is when they do come home, um, there are the same risks, and then because you don't move from one area where there's risk to another area where there's no risk. We also are in the middle of the pandemic in the Philippines, and once I think local governments or communities hear that a certain group is coming from the outside, there's also a certain amount of well, trepidation in accepting migrant workers, even if they are originally from that area back home. So they've experienced, I think, a certain level of discrimination, both in their host country and then now when they come back home, which was never the case before. And as mentioned by, again, a representative, there is government support, but it is only one time. So, and very limited. And in the beginning, actually, they weren't offering the support if they were from migrant workers' families. So they were in that category. Um, they were in that category of receiving assistance from the government. So it's been quite difficult for our migrant workers throughout the migration cycle. And there's a lot of uncertainty as we move into a longer span of time because they're expecting to go back to work, they're expecting to continue providing for their families, and sometimes that opportunity is not there anymore. So I think that this is a sort of new situation. There's a different level of risk and uncertainty for migrant workers, both in their host countries and abroad and at home.
Maria, I just thought that I could just come in there and ask you, limited resources will forever be the song that we will have. I think I am speaking limited resources to my children, even, even in good and bad times, we have limited resources. So I think this is the song that we will always have because we will just never have enough. What kind of coping mechanisms have you sort of seen from different embassies and from the work that you are doing in sort of following up labor migration for overseas Filipino workers? And here I can generalize it and broaden the group a little bit wider than the female domestic workers. What kind of coping mechanisms have you sort of seen, and what kind of partnerships do you see that try to skip this I would not call it an excuse, but I would the reality, actually, this is what it is, this challenge that embassies will forever have and consulate services will forever have in terms of trying to address the needs of all its citizens abroad?
This time I won't talk just about the COVID situation. I think I will broaden my context and look at other situations where you have different actors working together to support our migrant communities abroad. So we have natural disasters. We've also had recently, for example, overseas absentee voting. And this has always been cause for the Filipino community to come together and support each other. So I've heard early on, I think some of the stories have already been mentioned early on, where you've had Filipinos, for example, in the health sector, helping fellow Filipinos who are it's difficult to be in another country and then not speak the language and then have to go through their health system. So there has been a lot of support from fellow Filipinos, for example, talking with their kababayans, talking them through what may happen if there's COVID, what will happen, how do you keep safe, and what are the services that are available to you. And in other countries also, even here in Asia, where the medium of, well, the language is not English, I think even host countries are starting to realize now that they have to take an extra step in order to translate and in order to communicate health protocols to, foreign workers, not just Filipinos, of course, but foreign workers. So that's something that I see, which is very positive. Trying to understand how this pandemic affects those who are not from a particular locality. So now they're taking time also to make sure that foreign workers, Filipinos, understand the protocols, even if they're originally in another language, and what to do in these situations. But in general, we have a term, bayanihan. Also, this doesn't happen always in the context of the embassy. It's not always official. It can happen in the context of the church, sometimes the local Filipino station, groups that belong to a same community back in the Philippines. So it's a sort of spontaneous reaction to anyone in need. And that spirit stays. I think that is good, but of course, nothing beats having actual services provided for overseas Filipinos in need. So we always have that. I've been looking at these situations since, I guess, 2010, 2011, and it's quite constant that a fellow Filipino will help you through it. So they rely a lot on these networks of Filipinos when they are abroad.
Mm. Very interesting to hear about that flexibility, I think, in crisis. And I think it's something that we can replicate across government systems, and I think across even all our, even in the area of work as civil society, academia, and all the, all the works that try to contribute and sort of support different development efforts, or to alleviate the impact that crisis has on particular communities, and also looking at the vulnerable. So I think I really like, Maria, how you sort of, ended there, bringing in the different elements that the consular services within a country can also look upon in trying to sort of stretch the limited resources that it has. I think that it's a good time for us to go to our next speaker, and I will firstly apologize because I think I've misplaced the two names, and I think you will understand in a little while. So the video that was playing earlier on was not by Ambassador Islam, because Ambassador Islam is the ambassador of the People's Republic of Bangladesh to the Kingdom of Bahrain, and he has been there since 2020, and prior to his appointment there, he was the deputy chief of mission in Saudi Arabia, where he was there for about 5 years. So he's just arrived to Bahrain actually quite timely during the pandemic. So it would be quite interesting to hear also from his side how that kind of transition went, arriving in a period where there's the pandemic and migrants really distressed in that period. And prior to that, he used to be the deputy permanent representative to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and he was there for a couple of years. And in 2.5 decades as a career diplomat, he served as a chargé d'affaires in Beirut. He has been in Australia. He has also been in Baghdad and previously in South Korea. So quite an extensive coverage there. And so I think we can also benefit from hearing his experience as a senior diplomat, as a government representative, that I guess has been looked upon in different crises that has happened in his experience. And the theme of his discussion, I mean, I think he will really then take us through this transparent, efficient, and accountable consular management. I think 3 kind of objectives that that may sound impossible to match, but I think we are ready to hear from him. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Paddy. No, I understand because of many participants. Thank you for MFA, DRFDT, Civil Society Action Committee, organizing this webinar. And we listened to Paul, Consul General of Dubai. And actually, we know today's topic, the objectives of Global Compact Migration, and the consular aspect is very important in the total migration cycle. And as Paddy was telling that I was in Saudi Arabia, and just I landed in Bahrain during pandemic, actually mid-March I am here. So I have seen actually how it was a difficult situation for all migrant community across the globe, and particularly in the Middle East. In this region, because like Bangladesh, we have about 10 million people working abroad, and out of that, almost 75% they are working in this Gulf this GCC. So in Bahrain, there are about almost 200,000 Bangladeshis working here, and they were severely affected by this COVID, and also they needed efficient, transparent, and accountable consular services. And not only this COVID situation, it is actually required for every time. And Paddy, she was mentioning that yes, we all the time talk about shortage of resources, but this service is very essential. That's why those who prepared this compact, actually they thought about this aspect, because it is very important in the migration cycle. Though we have already Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, 1963. The Article 5, Article 36. I will not go into details. Actually, they talked about this kind of consular protection, assistance, and support for countries, country, and here in migration context, trade, origin, transit, and destination. So that is there. But why it has been again incorporated in among these 23 objectives? Because still it is needed and also need to be upgraded. And I can tell you from the government of Bangladesh perspective, yes, we are striving to improve the situation. And since we are from South, actually in developing countries, we have actually a lot of allegation about some mismanagement and corruption and some other things related to their services. So the government of Bangladesh actually looking at that aspect, and also you will be happy to learn that current Minister for Foreign Affairs, who starts in early 2018, after coming to office, he introduced actually one app. It's called in Bangla Dutavas, but in English it is Embassy. That app is being used by many of our missions, and actually in that app, people can access different types of services. And there are some challenges of that apps, and that's why Ministry of Foreign Affairs Bangladesh took a new project where all 78 our missions abroad, they will actually perform in a digital platform, not only through apps, but web-enabled services will be given, so that people, as I listened to Paul, he was talking about this social media and WhatsApp and some other, all these tools are there. So we need to make consular services very transparent one, and also very efficient one, and also accountable. Corruption should be eliminated altogether. And because this migration, migrants who are working in foreign country, any nationality, they are desperate for this kind of service. So there are some aspects, human rights aspects are there, their legal entity aspects are there, and also their vulnerabilities there, and due process should be made. And that's why in this compact, it has been rightly mentioned, and under that 14 objectives, they have narrated some other aspects how to achieve that. And I am hopeful, since this migration platform, the DFMD, and also IOM, international community, and MFA, like this kind of NGO and platform, you are pushing hard to implement this kind of mechanism by the government, by the embassies all around the world, so that migrant community, they get maximum benefit. And particularly those who are in crisis, those who are in need, like COVID-19 situation. This is unprecedented across the world. So we have learned many things, and we look forward to devise a new mechanism, new tool, so that people at stress and at need, at crisis, they get maximum benefit from the consular missions, from embassies around. Thank you very much for giving me the chance of to take part. And I'll be here till another 30 minutes or so. So if you have any audience, they have like to ask any questions, I'm ready to. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Islam. I think we can already see some questions that are coming in for you in our chat box, and I think we'll be able to read them to you. And maybe as I give you this this reflection when you will come back, I think the use of ICT and and innovation technology in facilitating services is definitely something that we need to get a hand on. I think that you have also rightly brought the use of social media, because we do know that one of the most important tools in terms of keeping in contact, not just with family members and their loved ones at home for migrants, is the mobile phone. It really is like a #1 asset, which provides not only, it doesn't just provide communication, but I think it provides access. It also one that provides jobs and information, particularly in times of crisis. And I'm just thinking here about also the fact that I think that, you know, many of our countries and yours included would have had a list of undocumented migrants. How do we ensure that we keep them within within that coverage, because their vulnerabilities, if you like, are even much more heightened in times of crisis. So they're undocumented, they're not registered with the embassy, but in times of crisis, like I heard from Ambassador of Benin to China, and we'll hear from him a bit more. He did say that something happens when there's a crisis. You know, something happens when you do have a crisis, and even doors that did not open, you want to open them because you need help. How did your embassy capture undocumented migrants in terms of providing support, whether it was with the services that were provided through ICT means or with direct interaction with them?
Thank you. Actually, during this COVID, we extended our services to all, particularly to us, those who are even undocumented. We treat them equally, like documented migrant workers, because they are ultimately our national citizens. And I can see Anisur from Bangladesh, she was asking about human. Yes, as I talked about transparency, accountability, and efficient service, that means actually we have to be very kind and also polite to our migrant community workers, as well as also giving service transparently, efficiently, without corruption. So that two aspects actually it is there. We are trying to strive for achieving that. There are some allegations, I admitted. That's why we want to eliminate those kind of notion and misbehavior and also misspend. I talked about that. So if we can introduce this kind of online mechanism and also transparency open to wide open each and everyone, then we can curtail that. And as Betty, you were asking that, yes, during this crisis, even Governor of Bahrain, we are happy to inform you that at the starting of pandemic, His Majesty King, he announced amnesty to undocumented workers, and many of Bangladeshi workers, those who are not documented here legally without valid visa, they obtained valid visa, and their number has reduced. So this end of December, that facilities amnesty will be over. So I am hoping during this month, remaining few thousand Bangladeshi, still they are not being registered with the government of Bahrain. They will be doing so. And not only that, today's objective is not about that, but I can see in our objective some 18 skill matching and skill upgradation. I have taken a project for Bangladesh community here. Those who have not adequate skill, we will be giving them training and allowing them to absorb in the local job market, so that during crisis they have their skill sets and they can get better jobs, better salary, and so that they can stay legally here. So this kind of actually service and innovation we are continuing, and as I said, there are still many rooms for upgradation, and we have to strive to improve our services, our hard work and diligence, and also broad mind and open mind, and also not always complaining about. I liked your point. It is not always you tell our resources limited. No, we have to extend our assistance and help to our migrant that need. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that intervention. And I think we just to remind the audience that we do have the Q&A tab. So you can feel free to share your questions in there. So some of our discussants are looking at some of those questions. And at the same time, we will also be sharing any kind of materials that will be shared by any of our presenters today in there. I think we also have a bit of admin that we have to sort out in terms of those of you who are joining us for the GCM certificate course that we've been offering, that started off in September and will be concluded this February. So you can feel free to look into the chat box and see the relevant tools for your attention. And also to inform you that this session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube for those who would have missed the start of it. But we are, we are soldiering on, and coming from coming from Asia, where we've sort of seen the mix between Asia and the GCC. We are just going to take a dive and move a little bit east, still in Asia, but ask our ambassador of Benin to the People's Republic of China, but he's also covering quite a number of other countries there, to just give us his intervention. And before he comes in, let me just introduce to you Mr. Simon Pierre Adevolande, who is from the Republic of Benin, which is in West Africa, and he has he graduated from the highest school of management in Lomé in Benin, and he also took a vocational training at Harvard University, the JFK School of Government in the United States. His career spans through from the Americas to Africa, and he's looked at a wide range of development issues. He has about 27 years and more, actually, with a lot of specialities there. He has been working in Benin and in other areas, particularly with the United Nations system. He has worked for UNDP, for World Bank, for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, for the Canadian Development Agency. At least that's what it was called in not too long ago, before they made the transition. So he really does understand what it means like to work also on the front line in his country. At the same time, he has been the chairman of the Alabama Benin Trade and Economic Forum. He has been the director of the International Gospel and Roots Festival. So, adding a different element to his experience there, a close relationship with the African diaspora worldwide, and involvement on the African continent as well. He has also served and contributed to the formulation process of the compact, so the funding agreement that went for the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which, as you would know, is quite an important contribution, particularly for countries in the global south and also in Africa, in terms of how the United States Agency for International Development engages with African partner states. So I could go on and on and on, but here we are bringing him particularly, and I think this part is important before I end, that he used to be the presidential candidate for the March 2016 presidential election in the Republic of Benin, and he was a member of the political coalition that was supporting the head of state in Benin. And today he is the ambassador of Benin to the People's Republic of China, with a vision which is in this era of globalization. He would like to turn Benin into a modern democracy based on participatory leadership, govern differently Africa, and a credible partner. So a mouthful, but I think quite important, and I thought to read that out because, looking at where he's positioned as ambassador now, Benin is an important trading partner to China, and China is an important trading partner for Benin, and therefore we would like to understand from you, Ambassador, how do you sort of foresee the type of migrants that you represent, if we could put that, or that approach your services in the consular department? And at the same time, we want to understand, thinking about, when we heard about the breakout of the start of the COVID virus in Wuhan, what was the situation like for some of the Benin students that you had there? What was really happening to other migrants, or rather citizens from Benin who were in China and in other places that you represent? So maybe we can kick you off from there, and then we can push it along.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are listening from. Thank you very much, Mrs. Paddy, and all the organization to invite me to this panel. You'll be here with me. Benin is a French-speaking country, and sometime in the evening, my English level is a little bit low. Then you'll be here with me. Thank you very much. Our discussion today is very interesting. In the point of view of the position of ambassador to provide services to the citizen, our citizens in the country that we are covering. In the case of Benin, in China, we have three types of migrants. We have the students and the trainees, who are the biggest number, and we have the permanent residents, and we have also those who are businessmen or women who come to trade in China for a short period of time. Most of the time, the migrants don't contact the consular service until they have a challenge. They are in the countries, but even sometimes they don't know even they have consulate in the countries until they have the need of the service of consulate. And I will take the opportunity to share the experience that we faced during the COVID-19 breakout in last January. Starting in Wuhan, I have at that moment around 60 students in Wuhan. And personally, 2 weeks before the breakout, I was with them to celebrate the New Year with them as I do usually. I always spend time to meet them and to know more about their challenges and how we can bring support. And particularly for Wuhan, I was there early in January before the breakout. And I can see that the first challenge that we face is how to know how many people we have in the country. Because China is big in many provinces, it's not everybody that are registered at the consulate. Then that was the first challenge, because the parents are calling from home to know exactly how the embassy will support them. But at the same time, we don't know all of them. But lucky, we used to work with the Federation of the Students. They have a federation of all the students who are living here. They are the ones that help us to update the database that we have. The same thing for the permanent resident. They have an association that I used to visit often from city to city. The third category, I don't have any information because they just come to the country and then do their business and stop by because there are no flight to go back. And we got a lot of support from the Chinese government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to pass the information to those people, because there was a panic everywhere. The students, they are young people, and we need to gather information from the ground and then share with our government to know how to bring more support to them. And Chinese government was very, very helpful to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also through the provincial Bureau of the Foreign Affairs that help us to get in contact with our citizens, to know their needs and see what the government of China can provide and what we as an embassy can provide to them additionally. For instance, the mask. The mask at the beginning is not like today that we have masks everywhere. It's really a rare product. Then how to find association that will help us to not only to collect at the embassy level, but how to dispatch those masks to the people, how to give them gloves and all those things. That was really a full-time work. The embassy leave all the other activities and focus only to assistance to the citizen. But also what I will emphasize on here is the fact that we establish a close relationship with the government at home so that we can provide information to the parents, because everybody wanted to know how we can bring back home the students. But at that moment, when we analyze the situation, it's not the right decision to make, but how to explain that to the people, to the parent at home. That was really challenging for us, because they think that we are not doing anything for the students. That it was, but I will admit here that it not come to my mind to ask assistance from IOM, because I haven't know that they can provide assistance to the embassies to in times of challenge like that. But like you mentioned, we are not covering only China. From China, we have India under our jurisdiction. We have Cambodia, Bangladesh, Korea, Thailand. Then all the students of our citizens in those countries also are calling to ask assistance. But we put a network information in place, and that is where the social media is very, very important in our area to provide information. Through the social media, we can send the information at the same time to everybody through the federation so that they can get access to know, and also to locate them to know what are their needs and how we can assist them. Another thing that was helpful here is the African solidarity. In Beijing, we have a group of African ambassadors who is well structured, and we have a very good leadership on that at that level. Then we were able to share information, to build strategy together, and also share ideas to see how we can work together to bring assistance to our citizens, the students, but also the resident, the permanent resident that we have. Then the African ambassadors group was very, very helpful to work together as a continent. We have the African Union resident, permanent resident ambassador here who are also inside the group. Then we work together as an African team to provide services to our people. Of course, the resource is one of the biggest challenge, because on normal time, the resource is not enough, but in crisis, but the government, through our exchange of information, the government of Benin provide additional resources to face that challenge and to come to help our citizens who are in difficulties. And we use that opportunity of the resources that we got from the government to make all our citizens to register to have a consular card, so that we update our database inside the embassy to know who are the citizens that we have, where they are, in which provinces, that allow us to prepare more assistance, to be more efficient, to provide our assistance to them. I think the challenge that we face is also those who finish their study and want to go back. Those who come just to do the business, the airport are closed, and they come for the short period of time. They cannot stay in the hotel for more time to pay the bills. That was very challenging. But through the solidarity of those who are permanent residents, we are able to take some of them out from the hotels. They stay with some of our citizens to help them. And also we get some assistance from the government to take some of them back home. I think the more important is the informations, because the migrant assistance to the migrant for me is the teamwork. It's the teamwork that involves not only the embassies and the consular service, but also the migrants, and also both the government in our capital and the government in the host country. Then we need to put in place the service, the information services for those who are here, but also the parents at home, so that we can be at the same level of information. Finally, we have one type of migrant that we take in account at the same level to those. There is our citizens who are, for one reason or another, find themselves in prisons. They're in prison. For my embassy, every year, we take a tour at least once a year to go through all the prisons that we have our citizens, to visit them physically, to provide them assistance, to provide them also encouragement, and to support them morally. And even during the COVID time, we are not able to travel around, but we request from the administration of the prisons the authorization to talk to each of them on phone. And we get that authorization, and we call them to strengthen them and give feedback to their parents at home for those who give the contact of their parent, so that we let them know that they are safe. Then briefly, that is what I can share with you in terms of practical assistance to the citizen abroad. The resource challenge is already there, but how do we use the small that we have to make a big impact? And I think the social media help us a lot to attend all of them, at least to let them know that the ambassador here know that you are in the country, and anytime you have the challenge, don't hesitate to contact us. This is what I can share with you briefly, and during the Q&A time, I will be available to answer your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think as you are reflecting, maybe we can come back to you on in the Q&A. You can give us a bit of your reflection on how, I mean, you've talked about a group of migrants that is very hard to reach, which is migrants in prison. You know, having been part of a community myself when I lived in China, even when citizens wanted to reach out to those that we had heard of had been imprisoned, it was not possible. And we knew that the only way you could do it is via your consul. You could not even send anything. You cannot send food. You basically cannot be able to communicate. So it's so comforting to hear that in this time of crisis, that there is that kind of support that goes to our brothers and sisters for one reason or another who have ended up in a situation that I am sure they would not have wanted to be in, regardless of what has happened. So I think that this work of visiting people in prisons remains critically important, and maybe we can also hear from other ambassadors who've joined us and the consular services who've joined us here in the panel about how they're dealing with this hard to reach group of migrants, if we could call them, in a way, because they are neither in your control nor are they in the control of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who would be your natural interlocutor. And there they would probably be with the state security, and that sometimes becomes very difficult. So maybe we can hear a little bit from you how you managed to navigate that system. And if you could add to that group, because Ambassador, you've already explained to us about prisoners, but how to deal with undocumented migrants. So this group of, in some countries, they say they are illegal. In migration terms, we try to say that the person cannot be legal. I may not have a right of residence or a right to be in a particular jurisdiction for a particular country, but I'm irregularly in that sense. So these irregular migrants who are there because they've overstayed or they took the wrong visa, or for one reason or another, they've just found themselves not to be on the good side of that local law. How are we really helping them? Because it's still part of the migration journey. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that in terms of maybe support that you are getting from, or that you're looking at in terms of returning migrants or facilitating them, but working together with the local government. You explained about your relationship with the Provincial Bureau of Foreign Affairs. That's very exemplary to hear that in crisis they were also able to come up for you and help. I think it's also very good and commendable to hear about the work that the Federation of us, the Federation of Students comes in, and also the diaspora community that really comes in to push these efforts so that we can sort of block the seal where we have limited resources. So we can come back to you and to also other ambassadors to talk about undocumented migrants when we come to the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And for now, as we proceed with our conversation, we will move on to our next speaker. And then our next speaker is not in a consular section, but has done some very interesting work. And I will just read to you the title of his research when I stumbled upon it. It said, "I don't want to have a separated home. Reckoning family and return migration among Nigerians in China." And I think, Adebayo, you have also done another piece of research, and and for some reason I'm not seeing the title being reflected here, but I think it was very much this, and I think I will read it out in your bio, where you're looking at Nigerians in China, and you are coming in from the perspective of a social researcher. So we are very excited to hear from you, because this is also, you know, as we've heard from all the ambassadors and also as we heard from Maria, listening to the voices of migrants is particularly very important as we channel all the support that we have to give. Otherwise, it remains not efficient, and actually we cannot even be accountable. But before I ask you to take the floor, Kudus Adebayo, let me just introduce our next speaker. His name is Kudus Oluwayoting Adebayo. He will correct me and give us the correct spelling, and I'm sure you will have a good laugh, because I haven't gotten his middle name even after practicing for so long. So Adebayo is a research fellow in the Diaspora and Transnational Studies program of the Institute of African Studies in the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and he's currently a postgraduate fellow of the African Humanities program of the American Council of Learned Societies. His ongoing research explores the transnational livelihood, masculinity, and family dynamics of diaspora deportees from China, but he has also engaged with issues of settlement, race, interracial family dynamics, child upbringing, and return among Nigerians in China. Adebayo, walk us through your research and your work.
Okay, thank you everyone for inviting me to this conversation. So I'm really going to thank the previous speakers, and I realized that a lot of discussion has been had at the level of the government. You know, when you think about it more broadly. But in my talk, even though I'm going to touch just briefly on a few of these. My discussion is going to focus essentially on the voices of migrants, you know, voices on the ground, you know, based on the research that I've been doing, and also how I've followed up on issues around migrant experiences during the COVID pandemic in China. So, my talk, basically, I think I'm going to just dive into it right now. So I'm looking at the Nigerian migration system and the consular service, a giant, migrant population on the continent, 2 to 50 million people. You know, a lot of consulates, you know, are as vast and wide-reaching as the population of Nigerian migrants. And this process of opening up embassies and consulates, you know, began back in 1957. And currently Nigeria has over 100 embassies and around the world, including most of this thing. And because of the situation globally and the fact that people are traveling, you know, a lot from this part of the world, you know, there are a lot of needs that consular services have been put in to provide protection, and then also assistance and cooperation, you know, as that sort of help improve the well-being of migrants. And then some of these needs, you know, around issue of irregular migrations, you know, from issue of trafficking and being stuck in place. A lot of work has been done on trafficking of Nigerian migrants, and how these people, particularly women, you know, experience all kinds of issues. And then also the problem of undocumentation, or being undocumented as a result of illegal stay, you know, problem with regularization of stay, and the consequences of imprisonment. So if you also look at the issue of deportation, particularly when it comes to the issuance of emergency travel certificates, you also see that there's a lot of need around this. But more recently, we have seen increasingly that the Nigerian Consular Protection Services, you know, has become so vital, you know, for the protection of Nigerians globally, you know, and in different contexts. You know, we see recent context of emergencies and humanitarian crisis, you know, around illegal detention and harassment, issue of xenophobia, and disease pandemics such as the COVID situation we're having currently. And then if you look at the trend, all around different settings, from the to, despite the context of the ECOWAS agreement and all of that, you also see issue more recently from, I think, from 2018 and upward, illegal and clandestine deportation of Nigerians from Germany, and then also issue around xenophobic attack of Nigerians in South Africa, and more recently, forced quarantining and ejection from hotel and apartment, in China as a result of local COVID control measures. So we've seen increasingly that the Nigerian consulate, has become really crucial, to improving the life of Nigerians more at the global level. But there are issues, that have been raised, at different levels, ranging starting from not having enough data, on Nigerian foreign citizens. Of course, this is connected to the issue of having a large population of undocumented people. And then reports, that done among Nigerians in Ghana and South Africa, reveal that about 49% of Nigerians, perceive the Nigerian consulate to be unhelpful. That's a lot of percentage. And a report back in 2006, a while years back now, it shows that the Nigerian government is seen as failing to adequately defend migrants' rights. That there's a context in which immigrants have often been seen as devil to protect their rights abroad. So the Nigerian embassies do not really support migrants and protect undocumented and even legal migrants. So going to the embassy has been seen or described as a very last resort. That is coming from DEHAS, who conducted a very large survey among Nigerian migrants back in 2006. But much has not changed, in the current era. There's still context of delays and that the Nigerian embassies citizen. In fact, some are seen at times sort of supporting the host country against their own migrant population. So from that large context, I just want to give that background so that when I dive into the experience of Nigerians in China and the context of my own research, you can see how this global context also manifests, at this local level, and how that is affecting the lives of Nigerians there. So we talk about these flows, and of course, I like that the ambassador from Benin had pointed at some of these issues in terms of the categories. But what we also find is that there's no accurate data, of course, but studies indicate that Nigerians are the largest African migrant group in cities like Guangzhou, when they have moved to in large number from the 1990s upward. And as a result of this growing population of Nigerian presence, you see a situation in which Nigerian government decided that apart from the Shanghai and Beijing consulate that are available, to also open a consular office, in Guangzhou back in 2014. And this has been very useful. And part of the research that I did, was particularly to ask participants, what is the relationship between Nigerians, the Nigerian community there in Guangzhou and the Nigerian consulate in that city. From my research, I found that the consular office, has played an important role in improving the well-being of Nigerians. From issue of access, ease of access to consular services, to visa support, to collaboration, with the association and local authorities, particularly when it comes to dealing with the issue of irregular migrants, particularly those that have been stalked or arrested, and then you want to process and return them. So they have played a lot of role. And then there's this arrangement of amnesty that was agreed upon, which made it possible for people who have overstayed to have access to return home without going through imprisonment and at a reduced cost. But despite this, there's this whole vibe that I got from the field, in which some of the people I met have the perception that there's this constant distinction, made between business community and the documented versus those that are in unstable employment and the undocumented. So you have this feeling, in the streets of Guangzhou, and this constant perception that the consulate cannot help. When you ask them, oh, you are in this situation, you're having this challenge, have you approached the Nigerian embassy and all of that? So there's this dismissiveness, that result from that, oh, the consulate can't help. And then that it takes time to resolve a lot of issues. And you also have a situation, because of these this gap between the migrants on the ground and also the consulate, you have a situation where migrants in critical need, those who have to return home, those that are sick, that need a document to go back, rely on individuals, and community organizations. And some of those individuals who have to do the running around are themselves undocumented, further exposing them to vulnerabilities and possible deportations. So as this large context shows, we can begin to understand why at the height of the COVID pandemic and the need to control that the spread of that disease in Guangzhou, you see a lot of Nigerians, experiencing difficulties. In fact, COVID has proved that more than ever, effective consular support for Nigerian migrants is crucial. For those who had come in to just do the money and all of this, to issue of fears of arrest and a lot of these issues. So we also see a situation of forced removal and homelessness, resulted from strategies of Guangzhou administrators to manage COVID, resulting in serious rights infringement and caused sort of misery, if you want to take that in non-one-time situation, where people have to be homeless and a lot of that. So we also see that because of the social media, the spread and the how people quickly, raised issues on the different platforms globally, we see Nigerian diplomats, coming out in the streets and trying to intervene. And they had a lot of success with this because you have sort of street level diplomacy going on, in that kind of encounters where these people come out and then have conversation with local authorities so that they can improve or better manage and respect, migrant rights. But for me, I think that this needn't happen, because they need not be in the streets, at this critical time during major health crisis, because they endanger themselves. I'm talking about the people from the consular office. They endanger themselves, their staff, and local, and also the migrants themselves. So I feel that there's a need, for joint effective policies that sort of lay out what step to take, and how nationals ought to be treated and with respect. This means that there must be a continuing dialogue, with local authorities. But the first step towards this, and I'm rounding up now, is to think about the foundations, of unsupportive consular system and non-protection of citizens abroad. There has to be a shift in orientation, in thinking, and this is why this is important, because back as far back as in 2014, there's a way that sort of so-called consular representative also see migrants, see them as people who had run away. And then there's a statement credited to Shola Onidipe, former ex-deputy chief of commission in Beijing, who was saying that if this was not a democracy, he would say that most of the Nigerians that are living outside the country should not be there. They have no business being there. He talked about how they are doing drugs, how they are opening shops without licenses and not paying tax and a lot of this. So there's this image or representation that also come out, from the level of the consul, that sort of make it difficult for a better negotiation of respect, of human respect, that ought to come with service or consular service provision, particularly to people that are vulnerable. So I also think that once they are moved beyond that, there's also the need, to fund and improve capacity, provide support in terms of material and human resources. So Nigerians, that have been battling with funding issues, recently at the national level, that is also affecting how effective, consular services and capacities, can be extended to help migrants. So I feel that there are issues to look at, in terms of considering improving consular support in Nigeria. First is about data collection, knowing how many people that are there, and then know the kind of response that needs to happen. And then there's also the technical skill needed to support migrants effectively and in a timely fashion. But beyond that, there's need to pursue, equality of nations as national practice towards ensuring that citizens are treated with respect by authorities of the host communities. And then also need to collaborate with community associations to sensitize, migrants on the protection opportunities available to them, as both as citizens and also as human beings. So thank you for the time. I've overshoot my time a bit, but thank you.
Not at all, Adebayo. It's very interesting to listen to you and very refreshing, I have to say. And I think that the messages that you have brought across from your experience and from your observations in your research are fundamental. And I think that they are critical in building in us, the keywords these days are building back. How are we building back? How are we reimagining? How are we resetting within the context of, a post-COVID world, if we ever will have a post-COVID world. But I think that we have a very good opportunity to get a few reactions actually from some of the questions that or some of the issues that you have raised. And I was going to ask Dr. Islam to just come back again and maybe touch on the issue of undocumented migrants. And I think attached to that, you have really you have rightly matched the issue of data as something that's very important. Ambassador Simon Pierre just outlined the importance of a data registry. They seem that during this crisis, they managed to attract, because that's the other thing as well, and that's the question that I sort of have also for social researchers like yourself and Maria. How are we really attracting migrants to come back and feel that this is a service that I need, but I can contribute to the foundation? So you said something about foundations, and usually when you look at a foundation, governments are also talking about finances. So the foundation and the finances should go together. But I think you are very much right in saying sometimes we need to think, what is the premise in which we're providing this service? What is the premise? And for us is to make sure that migration is orderly, safe, and done in a regular way, and that people are moving around, whether they are arriving, in transition, or returning in a very dignified manner. And this is what remains important, and that's the cornerstone that we have. Even sitting for our Global Compact for Migration, but even further up with the Sustainable Development Goals. So maybe I just bring back Dr. Islam. Dr. Islam, I think as you answer that question around dealing with undocumented migrants, the issue and the problem of data, which is also attached to our problem of foundations and finances, could you also respond to the question that Tampi Nagarguna has asked, Tampi Nagarguna Trade Union has asked in relation to the flexi visa. So the question there is that so many may not be in a position to pay for this flexi visa levies that you had mentioned, and so many are in jail because of the authority pressurizing them to pay pending money and ticket money. Are you aware of this, and sort of what is your position on it?
Thank you, Paddy. And actually, I wanted to leave, but since I also at the same time want all speakers, thank you very much. And a particular question about this LMRA, the Labor Migration Authority of Bahrain. They charge some fees for getting flexi visa. And actually regularization, there are two options. Actually, if they can get jobs, they can get a sponsor, they can go under them, or if they cannot get any sponsor, they can do it from LMR. But I understand what this Mr. Thampi, he asked about. The fees are very high. Initially, actually, when they declared this amnesty decree this year, the fee was very low. It was reduced, almost half they reduced. It was 182 Bahraini dinar like that. But now it is almost 380, near to 400 Bahraini dinar, so double. And actually, in fact, I requested LMRA chief to reduce this fee because this is the final month of amnesty. If that fee is not being reduced, then that many people actually they are already out of the jobs. So, and also those who are earning, they are earning less. So they cannot afford to pay this much amount of fees. That's why we understand that, and that's why I am actually pressing them to reduce that fee. And I'm hopeful they will be doing that. If not, then there will be a challenge. And that's why, as I said briefly, that I'm trying to launch a project for Bangladeshi those who are out of jobs, or upskilling them and putting in the job market. So that I am trying. And in respect to visiting prisons, those who are in jails for different terms, for different crimes or some sort of fine, we are regularly in touch with Bahrain authorities, and I'm happy to inform you that they are very transparent and they provide all data where they are. And you'll be happy to learn during this pandemic, His Majesty King also pardoned many jailed inmates, and not only pardoned, they also arranged their travel back to Bangladesh with Bahraini finance, and they arranged their flight. Only thing we facilitated, we approved their landing permit in Dhaka, so they were sent back about 300 plus, actually almost 400. And in June, we also organized a special chartered flight. And during that special chartered flight, there were many Bangladeshis who actually returned to Bangladesh. And among them, there were many who were sick and they didn't have enough money. And embassy, we provided about 70% airfare. So we took care of their airfare because Biman, the aircraft airlines who operated, they did not operate it free because that is commercial airlines. Certainly they charge, but embassy we facilitated for return of there. And I can see another question by Anisul from Bangladesh again about free visa. And actually there is nothing called free in the world. Actually it is a misnomer. So we are telling our Bangladeshi people, whenever you come to foreign land, you know your rights, you know where you are going, what kind of job you will be doing. So some agencies, actually unscrupulous agents, I should say, they actually, in the name of job placement, prepared some, shady papers and give it to migrants, and take money from them and send them in a foreign land, and they are landed in a very bizarre condition, without any jobs, any salaries. So these people are called so-called free visa. So during this pandemic, since they are not covered by any companies, any sponsors, so that is a real challenge. And we also, that's why, as I said, as around 70% were taken care of Bangladesh embassy. Why? Because they didn't have their own sponsor or any money, so faced that difficult. So we are encouraging each and every one to come in a foreign land with proper jobs, and if we can manage well in back home in sending countries, stopping that unscrupulous agents to lure experienced migrants to go to foreign land without proper jobs and proper papers, then we can contain this situation very much. And I am hopeful because of COVID situation. Now we have to learn many things, and we have to devise, speed up the process of transparency, accountability, and efficiency in each aspects of migration cycle. So we have to stop at origin country and plus agents, and also transit countries, they should be taken care of, and also in destination countries, certainly embassies and civil society, international organizations, NGOs, if we can collaborate, cooperate each other, and then we can tackle this issue and we can reach very outcome of global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. That is the actually aspirations of this compact. By the way, Bangladesh was in the forefront of devising
Yes.
this. So we know our Foreign Office, Foreign Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, they were very instrumental for devising this. So we are and we are very supportive to our migrant. Thank you.
Dr. Islam, thank you very much. I don't think we could, we could have had a much more fitting, response that has come from you. And I think also bringing out the important role of key countries that are sources of the key sending countries is really essential as we were negotiating the Global Compact for Migration. But I think evidently so also in the implementation, because we can begin to see what kind of challenges we had set ourselves up for, and like you've mentioned, you're about to leave for the meeting. So I can see Dr. Raj has her hand up. Dr. Raj, is it a question for Dr. Islam, or shall we let him go and then I will bring you on? Okay.
It's okay. No, he can go. It's a general thing, and I can talk about it later. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
I will give you a moment in a bit. Just to say again, thank you very much, Dr. Islam, for joining us. We're very delighted that you could be with us. But I just continue a little bit with the rest of the panelists as I put you. I don't think it's on the spot, because I think this is exactly the line of work that you are in. If I can bring back Maria. Maria, I don't know if you could just unmute your mic, and if you could, Maria, I wanted to sort of take a pause here and think a bit about the role of trafficking. I think we have heard that really being mentioned, that if when we haven't had pathways, or when we can't provide the right services, facilitators will show up and essentially take over, whether they are connected or not. Whether they are transnational, and in which case that we have seen in many cases across that there are some linkages, and in some cases we've also seen where the trafficker only knows as far as this particular point, or that particular point of facilitation. So if I'm involved in transport, I just know about the transportation and reaching to the next point. So I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about what we can do around data. And also looking at the fact that, imagine we have these undocumented migrants that are arriving, we have traffickers that are out for them, we have limited resources. What kind of alternatives are we looking at in terms of the work that you're doing? When you think about the foreign policy from the Filipino point perspective.
Okay, since I'm going to talk about the Philippine perspective, it's a very local take on trafficking. What we found is that a lot of the networks that have to do with trafficking are quite informal, and a lot of them are community-based, and a lot of them are linked actually through persons who are really familiar in a local setting, so family members, neighbors, and so on. And that's precisely why it's been very difficult to track data-wise. So you really have to have some sort of data mechanism at the local level. There are certain mechanisms, fortunately, that have been put in place precisely at this level. And with our new wish law, 122 or RA 122, it introduces a new actor, and we do have a very broad menu of actors to protect our migrant workers. It introduces a new actor, which is the local government. And they're supposed to have OFW help desks or kiosks. Oh, that's a difficult word. Help desks or kiosks at the local level. And what we've seen, at least in terms of early implementation, is that not all local governments are equipped to have this, because not all local governments will have many migrant workers coming from their area. But if it is done systematically, then it will be a big help. The local governments and their role in protecting migrant workers, it would be a big help at the point of just recruitment. Another point that I'd like to make is what some reports have been giving early in this pandemic, where there is more incidents of trafficking, especially when you are looking at areas also where there are local conflicts or violence. So it seems to be increasing in some areas in the Philippines. So that also has to be watched. So I think if you look at it strategically, not necessarily at the national level, but strategically at the local level, and in particular, for example, embassies with that kind of capability abroad, you will have a good system for at least trying to understand and control the phenomenon of human trafficking.
If I could bring in Ambassador Simon Pierre, if you are still with us, sir.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Adebayo brought in an interesting issue, the Guangzhou incidents, I think, as we ended up coining them. I think you alluded to already in your presentation, talking about how this crisis really brought not just the African fronts, the African nations together in Beijing, but I think also back on the continent. You could have seen, you saw a lot of solidarity in ministers of foreign affairs calling on to Chinese ambassadors and coming in to have discussions about what was happening in Guangzhou and in other parts where incidents had been reported. I wanted to just get a sense from you. Do you see this, and very important reactions, I must conclude from, as you had noted from the provincial side, but I think also Adebayo has also sort of alluded to, you know, local authorities reacting to it, but also how citizens and consul and everybody was sort of in the mix, trying to get a sense out of this these incidents that had led to attacks against the Black ethnic groups, essentially. I wanted to find out how it is in terms of moving those discussions forward. You know, how do we move these discussions forward so that when we reach a time of crisis, they are not the strategies that we adopt because we sealed it or we covered it. What would you say are some of the key things that you would bring forward in terms of talking about how we can avoid a repeat of the Guangzhou incidents, as we would term them?
Thank you very much. I think Guangzhou's incident is an example of how panic and fear can create a misunderstanding, because it was not a decision of the central government of China or the provincial governments, but it's the misunderstanding of why we only do the testing for a type of people without knowing that they are doing already for the others. But I'm happy that we were able to contain that issues quickly in the short period of time because of the involvement of the group of African ambassadors in China that work closely with our community in Guangzhou, but also with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing and the Bureau of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Guangzhou. That is why I'm saying that it's a teamwork. The issues of migrant issues is a teamwork. And we need to inform our people about the right, but also our people, our migrants, need to feel that the consulate and the embassy are there for them. That is the most important element, so that when the embassy or the consulate is taking action, they will trust the action that they are taking. In the case of Guangzhou, they're working together with the leaders in our community on the ground, and also the group of the ambassadors were able to come together with the local government and to stop what is going on and to clarify why the things are going on that level. I think the Guangzhou issue is for us a learning opportunity. A learning opportunity to see how, as a consulate, we need to provide information, but also assistance to our people. And that brings me to the undocumented migrants. How, as the embassy, we can assist the undocumented citizens, when we have the information, that is another question. If you don't know, how can you intervene in something that you know? I agree with Mr. Kudus that my community is not too big as Nigerian community. Then our local people in the various cities give us feedback on the people who are in those difficulties. And together, if we can send a note to the local government to assist them to solve the issues, or if the community can come together, provide resources to that person, the embassy contribute a little bit to bring him out of his condition and find a way to take him out of the country. Then it's the teamwork, like I'm saying. But Guangzhou's incident is, for me, a typical example of what can happen in the period of panic and fear. And when the local government and the consulate come together, it's easy to work together and to find a solution. That is what the comment that I can make on the Guangzhou's issues.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think, your words on trust, your words on solidarity are fundamental, particularly if we're to make sure that we're providing a service that is efficient. Understanding and trusting each other in this process remains critical. I think you've raised some very good points there. I'm also made to think about what Maria just mentioned, about how complicated trafficking systems can then be when there's this lack of trust, and I just wanted to say thank you again for the response that you gave in terms of managing undocumented migrants and coming together. I wonder if I could throw the question to, is Honorable Paul Cortes with us? Has he joined us? Feroz, can you see?
Not yet. I just checked with him. He's still in the middle of the desert.
All right. Okay, that is good, because I was going to see if I could pose this question to him, but maybe I could bring back any one of the other speakers, and maybe Adebayo, you can take this one, and we see how we take it in turns. Just thinking about this building of trust. So Adebayo, you said something that was very interesting there. And then before I bring in Adebayo, I think I will ask Dr. Raj. I think you had a question, and I can see Tampi's hand is up. After this, I think I will ask, can Dr. Raj be unmuted before I ask the question? Dr. Raj, you can go ahead. I can see her hand is up, but okay. Adebayo, let me ask you this question while Dr. Raj is just preparing herself. Tampi, we will come back to you in a bit. We've talked about trust, and you said something there in your presentation, why should I go to my consul? They cannot help in crisis. And I sort of seem to remember all these times when sometimes, myself and people who sort of would have a European passport, we would measure which embassy would go first in reacting, which embassy would go first in producing an emergency document for me or for my travel, or which embassy will give me my passport. Actually, a lot of times you would say, okay, then you would rather go home. This is the answer that people would give. So how are we bringing the community that the embassies and the consulate services are supposed to serve better? Because we know we are living in a space where we have limited resources and they're not about to increase. So we can't spread, we're thin on the ground and we can't spread out much more. So how do we use what we have?
So I think that is a very important angle to it, and I like that the issue of trust and solidarity was particularly emphasized, in trying to let the communities know, as the ambassador suggested, to let the communities know, or to let those individuals know that the consulates and the embassies are there to serve them. So this is really important, and it's kind of message that is not getting through. It's not a message that is not getting through at all. And I say this because during the COVID crisis, a lot of exchanges were happening on different forums, and I was privy to listen to audio conversation, between a leader of the Nigerian community and also a local authority in Guangzhou, whereby they went into this extensive discussion and trying to reach an agreement, get to a place where they can convince those undocumented migrants to go into quarantine, and then to go to even some of these hotels, some hotels that are being allocated to that they can't pay for and all of that. But the ones that they can pay for, people are not sure whether they can go out, to do this, considering the crisis. So it's like what is happening in Germany, where on some platforms, civil society organization platforms, where they are reporting that despite the COVID situation and all of that, that the German immigration authority are still deporting Nigerians, some even pregnant women, who are not supposed to be in flight. So, and the question from that group is that, is deporting people, much important than dealing with the crisis or the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic at the time. And I think that is really important, for trust building, when you can ask questions that are simple as that. Some would say that, okay, it has to go on simultaneously and all of that. We can't abandon this because we have this crisis and all of that. But to reach the undocumented population and to get them to actually be proactive and bring them in terms of solving, an issue that is expanding, that is unsolved and difficult to track down, you really need to get a message across, that shows that the disposition of the state, of the host community, is to deal with the problem at hand. So I think seeing people who are staying in a place without document, as worthy, having worthy presence, how, or maybe they are possibly productive, to be in that place as well, is really important. So it's about this reorientation that I talked about, in my presentation, that we really need to look at the attitude of states, itself, and now they can get the message across to undocumented population that even in times of crisis, you can trust us to also still continue to respect your right, as a human being, with right to survive, with right to live, with right to seek out, opportunities, to better yourself and your family. So that is really important.
Thank you, Adebayo. I was, there was also sort of kind of even tempted to feel that, sometimes we also have to maybe find champions, among us, as those who are requiring this service from our consular services, to understand that they're operating within limited resources, and we find how best we can support, because as we know that not all services can be provided, and we also have to look at some kind of maybe a vulnerability assessment. And here I wondered if I could bring in William. I don't know if you do have a moment to just give us a comment there, William. And Dr. Raj, I think we tried to call you and we cannot see you putting your hand down. So maybe after William you can speak, and after that we have Om Prakash, if you can speak.
Okay, well, I'm unmuted.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Raj.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you so much for all these brilliant presentations, very informative and so on and so forth. I don't know if I want to give some observations, comments, or questions. Maybe questions will come out of it. So just give me a couple of minutes. A number of issues have come out of these presentations, lack of data and so on. So as regards lack of data, even for those who are coming as students or as regular workers to foreign countries, as part of their immigration process or out-migration process for that matter, I mean, they must have to fill some forms, where you're going, why you're going, where you will be. That will be one way, excuse me, to get some information on where they're going and to compile that information. Secondly, once they go as students, different categories, students, once they go, leave the country, there should be a form or some kind of item to say, this is the place where we are going to study, and our contact will be the consular contact in the city or the country concerned. Because when the immigration officer asks you or on the form, where are you going to stay when you leave? You say, okay, I'm going to stay at this and this address. Now, perhaps another column could be, in the case of those who are going as workers or going as, again, regular people, as students, okay? That this is what they are going to do and this is where they're going to be staying. Now, how the immigration can then convey this message through these days ICT to the embassies concerned or the consular section. So you start to build up and have some kind of follow-up. And as you said and others said, that there has to be cooperation and that the person leaving the country has a responsibility to report, or not report, to register at the embassy so they know. It's not when you need them, you go there. You're there to make sure that you keep the link and so on. And secondly, because what we are talking about, the compact, this is like a very theoretical thing. We are hoping or we are wishing that the authorities who are supposed to be implementing this in the host country, as well as in the home country, have been sensitized about this. Hey, this is in the coming. How do we train the officers in the home country? These are parts of the compact relate to the home country authorities or home country places. And that part relate to the host country. The host country. I gave you maybe I didn't give you an example. Some of the countries, I can give you the example of Canada. The immigration people have never heard of the compact. So they are just using the old laws that are written and that they're supposed to be following. So I don't know what we're talking about. In other words, this is a major and a general question to us that who are trying to understand this compact. Who are we talking to? Ourselves? Are we talking to the host country authorities or to the home country authorities? So there has to be some kind of platform. We need to get some information. Where is this going? And lastly, in this context, I think the role of civil society, both in the host and the home country, is critical to ensure that parts of this get implemented. Because remember, this is just a political agreement or talk. This is not a legal document. And how this can be legalized is at the whims of each of those countries, whether they want to do it or they don't want to do it. In the meantime, what can we do? And lastly, the consular sections, I think they need to be updated. Their mandate needs to be updated or broadened for that matter, because they were set up to provide consular services and maybe some services to their nationals in case they get stuck and so on. Those were small services and so on. So now, if that's the case, these mandates need to be updated, well-staffed, and staff needs to be trained and well-resourced. And at the same time, the people who are leaving, the migrants or students, have also a great responsibility. Thanks very much. Sorry, I've taken too much time.
That's all right. Thank you, Dr. Raj. It also sounded to me that we are, we're even entering a space of, public sector reform there. As we think about how are we really allowing various governments and what's the space there that they're being given in terms of, legal framework, structures, as well as financing, as we know, in order to serve the purposes of the foundations that we have built through the different commitments. But I wondered if I could ask, and maybe we can take a few more reflections. Mr. Eustace, I see your hand is up, and after that, Om Prakesh, if you're there. Mr. Eustace, please go ahead. If not, Om Prakesh, please. All right. Okay. So I think we see how we can move forward. Adam, I think I was going to ask Maria if you are there. Elisa Lao, if you are there, to just, I think you came in and you had a very good point there in terms of talking about local government.
Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Om Prakash.
Yes, please go
Hello.
ahead.
Yeah, ma'am, I have a smaller three questions. First of all, how many migrants migrated from Philippines to Dubai? This is the first question, because in the presentation, first presentation, it is not clear. Second is things, during all the discussion, I observed what is the role of, what is the responsibility of the ambassador during any pandemics, or how the ambassador interlink between the host country and origin country. It is the second question. And third is, my question is, first of all, this pandemic is started in China. China people, how to overcome this thing? Because the first impression or of her fearful this experience is a much overcome all the things, and because the China is faced these things firstly and other country face after that. So what is the experience of that thing? So this is my three small questions.
Okay, maybe we may not have time to tackle all of them. I don't know if there is any of the panelists who would like to take any one of them. Very quickly, if you can give your 1 minute on any one of those questions. Sorry, Mr. Omprakash, we cannot cover all of them.
Hello, Paddy.
Yes, Mr. Eustace, go ahead.
Yeah, I had read some question through the chat box,
okay,
which I expected Simon to have responded to with regards to African migrants that were maltreated in China during the peak of the COVID-19, trying to find out what the Committee of African Missions in China could do to seek legal redress for those African migrants that were so maltreated, and also what support did the missions provide for those migrants. That is one. Then secondly, talking about consular support to migrant workers, judging from Nigeria experience, we find out that many of the missions don't have labor attaches. And there's no saying that about 75% of migration is labor driven. And missions without labor attache, how do they provide consular support to labor migrants? It seems ironical.
Thank you for those questions. Ambassador Simon Pierre, I don't know if you are here with us, and you can choose any one of those to address. We know we're running out of time and we've kept you long. It's very late where you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. James, for your question. Like I mentioned previously, we work toward the group of ambassadors, African ambassadors in China, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the government to take point by point, and we work by country to country so that each country will provide the information, and then we take it as a common document and present it to the central government. That is how we work together on the issues. But the time will not allow us to go in detail, but that action stop the issues, and then after we work on cases by cases, how to solve the issues of those who were affected by the issues. We are still working on it. We get some result already, but because of the timing of the platform, I cannot go in details. But I can assure you that when the incident happened, the group of ambassadors and also the African Union, we work together with the Chinese government to tackle the issues. That is what I can say briefly about the solving of the issue. Now, the labor attaché in the embassies, each embassies have the structure of how it's organized. Some of the embassies, depending on the size of the migrant and the need of the service, organize themselves based upon that. Then I cannot talk generally about how each embassy is organized. But for myself, in my embassy, we have enough staff at the consular section to provide the assistance that we can provide to our citizens, depending on the three types of the migrant that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that. Marie, can I ask you to address Dr. Raj's question? Or maybe one of Om Prakash's, and then we would be wrapping up in the next couple of minutes.
Sure. Actually, I was interested in the question on what is the role of the ambassador. I think I'd like to answer that question because I think it's a very dynamic one. I think the role of the ambassador is changing, especially because there are new contexts to be dealt with, especially in this last year. In the Philippines, one of the pillars of our foreign policy is assistance to nationals. So it should always be central to the role and tasks of the ambassador, the embassy, and the consulates to assist nationals. to assist our nationals abroad in any way. But this doesn't mean that they stick to their job description. This doesn't mean that they stick only to what has been given to them by the Department of Foreign Affairs. What I've seen in terms of the more vibrant cases of consular practice, the more vibrant, the more innovative and the more engaging consulates abroad are those who have political will, those who have leadership to actually go out and ask the different migrants, organized groups, even if they don't belong to the Philippines, what they need, especially in times of crisis. So I think this is a very important feature, and it's changing how embassies and consulates deal with their communities abroad. So just like, let's say, a mayor would deal with a particular city or town in your locality, I think that's more of the role that now our consular officers and our embassies abroad are being asked to play. So flexibility also in terms of role of consulates abroad will definitely help, especially because times are changing very quickly now.
Maria, thank you for that. And I think you have put in a nice way to sort of summarize, I think, what some of the what our ambassadors who were with us today, who have been with us today, have shared, either through through the video that we had from Philippines ambassador, or even through the presentations that we had from both ambassador of Benin as well as ambassador of Bangladesh. And I think that, talking about this relationship about, the local, so bringing it down to as local as possible is central. Like you have said, the role is to represent the citizens, is to assist the citizens, and that is the role. But whether the citizens themselves understand the role, number one, and two, the responsibility that they have to register, and also to acknowledge and that their contribution would be important in ensuring that the services are efficient, is also another thing that I think we would have to leave for another day to discuss and deliberate. But I think that it has been a very insightful discussion, touching really on different angles. I didn't think we would touch the full span. I think of the breaking down the Global Compact objective number 14 as we have. But I think that this panel was fantastic in doing that. But before we close, I think I would just ask each of the panelists if you could just come back and give us your 1 minute reflection, either on our discussion or what you would like us to take away. I think Dr. Raj has asked a pertinent question about where do we take this? How do we go forward? We know as a research forum here that we would like to collect all your different reflections and thoughts and somehow have a natural home that they can feed into a particular process. But maybe it's a question that each of you should also give us as a takeaway. Where do we move with all the the different ambitions that we've set forward? So maybe I can start. With Ambassador Simon Pierre. Feroz, do you mind to just mute? I think we need somebody muted.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yes. I think the most important is to build a trust between the migrant and the consulate, and also let the consulate not only focus on administrative matters, like on the activity like celebrating a wedding, but also let the consulate provide the feeling the migrant that they are there for them and they can trust them and work together. And finally, let's each know that is the team. And we need to work as a team, same team, to provide it to each another. Thank you very much.
Adebayo?
Okay, so thank you. I think my takeaway will be starting from the point of trust, but also moving ahead, to issue of reorientation, reorientating the consulate and embassy mandates, in a way that recognizes the value and importance and rights of migrants generally, including undocumented migrants, as citizens, as human beings, and that they are worth protecting, and worth supporting, wherever they find themselves. So this, I think, is fundamental, and that shift, in thinking has to happen like really quickly in order to get the kind of actions, that are necessary, to improve the life of migrants, whatever they are. And I like that, to reiterate Dr. Raj's position of updating the mandate of the consulate more broadly, of the to begin to see how that system could be redefined, particularly for countries where these conversation, the global compacts and all other associated discussions are not currently happening. So there has to be a space where that conversation is happening, and then see how to mainstream that discussion into current practice. And finally, there has to be that increased or strengthened collaboration between community, the consulate or embassies, and also the host community. So there has to be that ongoing partnership. It's really, really important, because whether we like it or not, undocumented migrants, it's going to take a long time to attain that shift, needed to get undocumented persons to trust, the host community, and then also their own embassies. So we have to continue to leverage on that structure of community, to see how we can use it optimally as a way of improving support and access of migrants to consular support globally.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adebayo. Maria?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my key takeaway here is engagement in a very loose manner. I think we all understand that even if we have one model for consular services coming from our home countries, the context in which these consulates find themselves and the context in which our migrant workers find themselves is quite varied. And the key there is in understanding how consulates can better capture this variety and how they can continue to engage migrants in ways which are really probably appropriate and necessary. So the conversation, I think, has to go in that direction. Even if we are or we have to be a certain way, in this particular context, these are things that we have to work through, because these are the limitations that we have. So again, engagement and flexibility, I think, is quite key in moving this conversation forward.
Thank you. I wish I had a word cloud, one of those things that pops out as people are saying words so that they could, it could give us that one big word cloud. But I think that you've summarized it well, and an ambassador as well as Adebayo have put it also so well. I think we can, if engaging with our local communities, whether we're also looking at solutions as far back as home, in understanding how we deal with citizens, engaging with the various countries that are hosting us and our citizens, so that we can improve the consular services, engaging even those who don't want to be engaged as part of our communities, because in one way or another they feel that they would not be welcome because of their status, or because of their, the situation that they're in terms of their migration journey. And I think there's also something to be said about, how we engage facilitators, because like we have said, sophisticated networks networks. A lot of these facilitators are coming not really with, you know, big red devil ears, but we are really seeing them soft, gentle, light, and it can be very difficult for migrants who haven't understood what it is to take a journey across, whether it's, you know, if it's crossing a border, taking a plane, or moving even as a student to another part of the country. You know, I'm reminded of thinking about a young lady who, you know, who found herself in a situation where, if I think back 5-6 years ago, she wouldn't have been, and now she's in an unfortunate situation of being locked up behind bars, you know, in a country abroad, far away from home, simply because she didn't have the right advice. She didn't know which would be the right network to plug into. She didn't have a mentor who would have probably come from the diaspora community that would have been engaged. And also, I think what Ambassador had sort of come in to say is to talk about this network with the parents, you know, how we're dealing also with the parents as we send students, young students, away to foreign lands. So, you know, how are we allowing our migrants to plug into communities, to plug into our embassies, so that, you know, the services that we provide are indeed meaningful. So the services that the consular sections are providing out of the embassies are really meaningful. Thank you very much for this time that you have spent today with us. We have run 15 minutes into the schedule. We usually try to end on time, but this was such an interesting topic, and we could not just let our speakers go off. Many thanks again to all our panelists who have joined us today. And even though we lost two along on the way because of different priorities, we thank you for being with us. Ambassador Simon Pierre, thank you for being with us, sir. I hope you will have a good evening. We realize it's very late for you. Maria, thank you very much for joining us. Adebayo, I still don't know how to pronounce your middle name, so maybe we would need to remain on this Zoom call so that I can learn how to pronounce names better, because it's something that really does bother me when I can't get the name right. So thank you for joining us and also for sharing, you know, insights into the interesting work that you're doing there. On behalf of all the organizing organizations, the organizing committee, I would like to also thank the participants who have joined us, and for all the questions and the interventions that were provided in the chat, as well as those who came out onto the speaker. We will be meeting again, as we will until February, continuing with this series on the Global Compact on Migration. And next time we will be discussing Global Compact on Migration Objective number 15. I leave it to you to Google it and find out what it is. But to say, you can also follow us on our Twitter handles, on social media, where I think we're in all social media. You can follow us to see what panelists we're going to have, the discussions that we're going to have. And like we promise you, one time is never the same. And you can also watch all the relevant videos that we have produced throughout the last 14, and this one being the number 14 one. They are available on the YouTube channel of the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism. You don't have to spell that out, you just have to say GRFDT, and once you Google that, you'll be able to find all the resources that you need. Dr. Sada, if at all there is no further announcement, is it okay if we close? But I think we do have something coming up on the 18th, am I right? So we will just be sharing the screen of yes, we'll be sharing the colleagues in the technical room.